The bustling city of New York roared with its typical din of honking taxis and the murmur of crowded streets. But in the quiet office of Jack Turner, the outside world felt miles away. Jack's desk was littered with a chaotic mess of papers, old coffee cups, and files marked with urgent red stamps. The glow of his computer screen illuminated his face as he scrolled through the latest reports on a rare disease that had recently caught the media's attention. Jack was no stranger to high-stakes stories. He had a reputation for uncovering truths hidden behind layers of corporate and political obfuscation. His eyes narrowed as he reviewed the data. A string of patients afflicted with the same rare illness, treated with the same ineffective medication. It wasn't just unusual. It was suspiciously consistent. Each case seemed to follow the same grim pattern. Diagnosis, treatment, and then a decline that led to death. A sharp knock on the door pulled Jack from his thoughts. His assistant, Carla, peeked in, holding a file with a worn-out rubber band. "Jack, you've got an anonymous tip. It's marked as urgent." Jack's curiosity was piqued. He took the file from Carla and motioned for her to close the door. With a flick of his wrist, he removed the band and carefully unfolded the letter inside. The handwriting was hurried, the ink smeared in places as if written in a rush. Asterisk, Jack Turner, you don't know me, but I know what you're investigating. The cases of this rare disease are not just random. There's something much darker at play here. Follow the money trail. You'll find more than you bargained for. Asterisk. Jack's mind raced. The letter hinted at a conspiracy, a web of deceit that went beyond mere medical misfortune. His instincts told him this was more than a story. It was a potential scandal waiting to be uncovered. He glanced at the stack of files on his desk, his next step becoming clear. He began by reviewing the patient's records more closely. Each file revealed similar names, patterns, and, most disturbingly, the same pharmaceutical company listed as the treatment provider. The company's logo was prominent on every page. Jack's heart pounded with the realization that he was onto something significant. The clock on the wall ticked away as Jack's fingers danced across the keyboard, searching for any connection between the patients and the company. His research led him to a series of financial reports and press releases, all of which painted a picture of a company with an impeccable public image but questionable practices hidden beneath. As the evening wore on, the office's hum became quieter. The dim light from the streetlights outside cast eerie shadows on the walls, mirroring the dark discoveries Jack was making. He leaned back in his chair, a frown etched deeply on his face. The implications of the anonymous tip were growing more serious with each passing moment. Jack decided to take a break and grabbed his coat. The night air was cold and crisp, a stark contrast to the warmth of his office. He walked through the streets, the city lights flickering against the dark sky. His mind was preoccupied with the potential implications of his findings. Returning to his apartment, Jack knew this was just the beginning. The seed had been planted, and the investigation had to start. He had to find out who was behind the disease, why they were hiding the truth, and what it would mean for those who were suffering. As Jack settled into bed, the gravity of his task weighed heavily on him. Tomorrow, he would have to dig deeper, confront the complexities of the story, and navigate the murky waters of medical corruption. The journey ahead was fraught with danger, but Jack was determined to uncover the truth. The city outside continued its relentless pace, oblivious to the storm brewing within Jack Turner's world. The first clue had been found, and the path ahead was set. Jack knew that his quest for the truth would only grow more perilous from here. The morning light filtered through the blinds of Jack Turner's office, casting long shadows across his cluttered desk. The city outside had already begun its frenetic rhythm, but inside, Jack was enveloped in a different kind of urgency. He sat at his desk, staring intently at the stack of patient files and the financial documents from the pharmaceutical company. The anonymous tip had opened a door, but Jack knew he needed more to get through. The phone buzzed, and Jack answered without looking away from the papers. "Jack Turner." A voice on the other end said, "I'm Dr. Sarah Collins. I heard you're investigating the rare disease cases. I might have information that could help." Jack's pulse quickened. "Dr. Collins, thank you for calling. What can you tell me?" I've seen your research. Some of it aligns with what I've been noticing in my practice, she said, her voice hesitant. But it's risky to talk over the phone. Can we meet in person? Jack agreed, and they arranged to meet at a small cafe just a few blocks away from his office. The prospect of meeting someone who could shed light on the situation added a new layer of anticipation to his investigation. As Jack approached the cafe, he could see Dr. Collins already seated by the window, her demeanor tense but determined. He took a deep breath and walked in, greeting her with a nod. They exchanged pleasantries, and Jack could sense the undercurrent of unease in her voice. "So, what's going on?" Jack asked as he settled into the seat across from her. Dr. Collins took a sip of her coffee, her eyes darting around as if ensuring they weren't being overheard. "I've been treating patients with this rare disease for years, and recently, I've noticed that the standard treatment provided by the pharmaceutical company isn't working. Patients are deteriorating faster than expected." Jack leaned in, his notepad ready. "Why hasn't anyone raised concerns before?" Dr. Collins hesitated before responding. "The company controls the research and the narrative. They've been covering up negative outcomes and influencing medical reports. Those of us who know better are afraid to speak out due to potential backlash." Jack's mind raced. "Do you have any proof of this?" "Yes," Dr. Collins said, pulling out a small envelope from her bag. "These are some documents I managed to get hold of. Internal communications, treatment protocols, and patient outcomes that don't match what's publicly reported." Jack took the envelope, his fingers brushing against the crisp edges of the documents. He knew that these papers could be the key to unraveling the mystery. "Thank you, Dr. Collins. This is incredibly helpful." Dr. Collins nodded, her expression a mix of relief and anxiety. "Be careful, Jack. The pharmaceutical company is powerful. They don't take kindly to anyone who threatens their interests." As Jack walked back to his office, the weight of the envelope in his hand felt heavier with each step. He carefully placed the documents on his desk and began to examine them. The discrepancies were glaring. Patient outcomes that were reported as positive but showed a stark decline in the internal documents. It was clear that the company had been hiding critical information. The morning transitioned into afternoon, and Jack continued to sift through the documents. Each new piece of evidence added a layer of complexity to the investigation. The more he uncovered, the more he realized the depth of the conspiracy he was up against. Just as he was beginning to piece together the puzzle, a sudden knock on the door jolted him from his thoughts. Carla's voice came through. "Jack, there's someone here to see you. They say it's urgent." Jack glanced at the clock. It was already late in the day. He opened the door to find a tall, serious-looking man standing in the hallway. "I'm Tom Harris," the man said, extending his hand. "I work in legal affairs for the pharmaceutical company. I've heard you've been asking some questions. I think we need to talk." Jack's heart skipped a beat. The appearance of Tom Harris was no coincidence. It was clear the company was already aware of his investigation, and the stakes were rising. "Sure, let's talk," Jack said, inviting Tom into his office. As Tom entered, Jack's thoughts raced, knowing that every conversation and every document now carried immense risk. The pressure to uncover the truth was intensifying, and Jack was ready to face whatever came next. The transition from his meeting with Dr. Collins to this new development created a tangible sense of escalation. Jack was now fully entrenched in a high-stakes game where every move counted, and the depth of the conspiracy loomed larger than ever. The city lights twinkled like 1,000 tiny stars as Jack Turner navigated the bustling streets of New York. His thoughts were preoccupied with the conversation he'd just had with Tom Harris. The encounter had been curt and unsettling, the weight of the pharmaceutical company's attention hanging heavy over him. The sleek suit and polished demeanor of Harris had left a mark of intimidation that Jack couldn't ignore. Back in his office, Jack sat in the dim light of his desk lamp, sifting through the documents Dr. Collins had provided. The discrepancies in the data were becoming more glaring. The pharmaceutical company had not only been falsifying treatment success rates but also manipulating clinical trial outcomes. Jack's fingers hovered over his keyboard as he prepared to draft a preliminary report, but a series of urgent notifications on his phone drew his attention. A barrage of anonymous text messages flashed on the screen. "Stop digging or face the consequences," and asterisk, "You're treading dangerous waters." Asterisk, each message was a stark reminder of the risks involved. Jack's resolve hardened. He knew that backing down was not an option. As the office emptied for the night, Jack decided to visit the address listed on one of the documents, a small, unassuming clinic on the edge of town. It was marked as one of the sites involved in the clinical trials. He hoped it might provide further leads. The clinic's exterior was weathered, with peeling paint and flickering fluorescent lights. Jack approached with caution, glancing around to ensure he wasn't being followed. Inside, the atmosphere was a stark contrast to the sophisticated offices he was accustomed to. The waiting room was dimly lit, with a few worn-out chairs and outdated magazines. Jack approached the reception desk, where an elderly woman with tired eyes looked up from her paperwork. "I'm here to inquire about the clinical trials for the rare disease," Jack said, trying to sound casual. The woman's eyes narrowed. "You'll have to speak with Dr. Martinez. He handles all inquiries about the trials." "Where can I find him?" Jack asked, his heart racing. The woman hesitated before pointing to a door at the end of the hallway. "He's probably in his office. Just don't bother him too much." Jack thanked her and made his way down the corridor. He knocked lightly on the door before entering. Dr. Martinez looked up from his desk, a middle-aged man with a weary expression. He immediately sensed Jack's intrusion was more than a casual visit. "What can I do for you?" Dr. Martinez asked, his tone guarded. "I'm investigating the clinical trials for the rare disease," Jack said. "I'm looking for more information about the treatment protocols." Dr. Martinez's eyes flickered with a mix of surprise and wariness. "I'm afraid I don't have much to offer. The trials are tightly regulated and monitored." Jack could sense that Dr. Martinez was withholding information. "I've already seen some inconsistencies in the data," he said. "I'm trying to understand why the treatment isn't working as expected." Dr. Martinez's expression hardened. "This is not something you should be involved in. The trials are conducted according to strict guidelines." Before Jack could respond, the office door swung open, and a tall, stern-looking man entered. His presence was imposing, and Jack recognized him from his earlier encounter with Tom Harris. It was clear that the pharmaceutical company's influence reached further than Jack had anticipated. "Dr. Martinez," the man said, "I think we've had enough of this discussion." The sudden appearance of the man and his authoritative tone sent a chill down Jack's spine. "Who are you?" Jack asked, his voice steady despite the tension. "I'm with the pharmaceutical company's legal team," the man replied. "It's come to our attention that you're poking around where you shouldn't be. I suggest you cease your investigation before things get worse." Jack's mind raced. The confrontation had escalated quickly, and he realized he had been put in a precarious position. "I'm just trying to uncover the truth," he said, meeting the man's gaze. The man's expression remained cold. "And the truth is that you're meddling with forces far beyond your understanding. Walk away while you still can." With that, the man turned and left the room, leaving an oppressive silence in his wake. Dr. Martinez avoided Jack's gaze and busied himself with papers on his desk. Jack knew his visit had made him a target, but he was undeterred. The encounter had only strengthened his resolve. As Jack walked out of the clinic and back into the night, the weight of the threats he'd received pressed heavily on him. The stakes were higher than ever, and he was now fully aware of the danger he was in. The path ahead was fraught with risks, but Jack was determined to see the investigation through to the end. The city's lights continued to shine brightly, but Jack's journey into the heart of the conspiracy had just begun. The more he uncovered, the more perilous his quest became, and he braced himself for the challenges yet to come. The next morning, Jack Turner's office was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the tumultuous night before. The threat from the pharmaceutical company's legal team loomed over him like a dark cloud, and the warning from Dr. Martinez echoed in his mind. The battle was no longer just about uncovering the truth. It was now a high-stakes game with formidable opponents. Jack sat at his desk, his laptop open to a list of potential allies and contacts who might help him in his investigation. The anonymity of his informants was one thing, but now he needed more tangible support. The door creaked open, and Carla walked in, carrying a file. "Jack, there's someone here to see you. They say it's urgent," Carla announced, her voice tinged with concern. Jack looked up, curiosity piqued. "Send them in." A moment later, a woman entered, her presence commanding and her demeanor confident. She was Amelia Ross, a well-known investigative journalist with a reputation for tackling difficult stories. Jack had heard of her, but they had never met. "Jack Turner?" she asked, extending her hand. "I'm Amelia Ross. I've been following your work on the rare disease cases. I think we might be able to help each other." Jack shook her hand, his mind racing with possibilities. "Amelia Ross, I didn't expect to see you here. How can you help?" Amelia took a seat, her eyes scanning the room. "I've been covering the pharmaceutical industry for years. Your case is the tip of the iceberg. I have sources and documents that might shed light on the deeper layers of this conspiracy." Jack's eyes widened. "What kind of documents?" "Financial records, internal memos, and whistleblower testimonies," Amelia said. "But be warned, the pharmaceutical company has eyes everywhere. They're not afraid to use their resources to protect their interests." Jack felt a surge of hope. "If we combine our efforts, we might have a chance to expose this corruption." Amelia nodded. "We need to be cautious. I suggest we meet my source who has additional information. It's a bit of a risk, but it's worth it." They agreed to meet Amelia's source later that day. Jack felt a renewed sense of purpose. With Amelia's expertise and connections, he could delve deeper into the conspiracy. As they left the office, the bustling streets of New York seemed to blur past. Jack and Amelia navigated through the city, their conversation focused on strategy and potential risks. The location of the meeting was a nondescript cafe in a quieter part of town. Inside, they found a man seated at a corner table, his face partially obscured by the brim of his hat. Amelia approached him first. "This is Jack Turner," she said. "He's investigating the cases of the rare disease." The man looked up, his eyes sharp and discerning. "Jack Turner, I've heard of you. I'm Victor Hayes, a former employee of the pharmaceutical company. I have information that might interest you." Jack took a seat opposite Victor, his anticipation palpable. "What can you tell me?" Victor leaned in, his voice low. "The company has been conducting unauthorized experiments, using patients as guinea pigs for unapproved treatments. They've been covering up adverse effects and manipulating trial results to maintain their profit margins." Jack's heart raced. "Do you have evidence to support this?" Victor nodded and slid a folder across the table. "Inside are emails, internal reports, and even some recordings. But be careful. The company has a lot of influence, and they won't hesitate to retaliate." Jack took the folder, his mind reeling with the implications. "Thank you, Victor. This could be crucial for the investigation." As they left the cafe, the weight of the new information settled heavily on Jack's shoulders. The conspiracy was deeper than he had imagined, and the stakes were higher. He knew that with each step forward, he was drawing closer to powerful enemies who would stop at nothing to protect their secrets. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Jack and Amelia pored over the documents and recordings, uncovering more about the pharmaceutical company's illegal activities. Their investigation was meticulous, but the threats and surveillance continued. Jack's sense of danger heightened with every passing moment. One evening, as Jack and Amelia were leaving the office, they noticed a black sedan parked across the street. The vehicle was unmarked, but its presence was unsettling. They exchanged worried glances, knowing that their enemies were closing in. "Let's take the long route," Amelia suggested. "We need to stay one step ahead." Jack nodded in agreement. As they walked away from the office, their conversation was filled with strategic plans and contingencies. The reality of their situation had set in. They were now part of a dangerous game with powerful adversaries. The path ahead was fraught with peril, but Jack was resolute. With Amelia's help, he had a fighting chance, but he knew that every move they made could be their last. The investigation had evolved into a high-stakes battle against formidable foes, and Jack was determined to see it through. The early morning fog clung to the streets of New York as Jack Turner and Amelia Ross arrived at their office. The tension in the air was palpable. They had spent the previous night piecing together Victor Hayes' evidence. Now, the weight of their discoveries pressed heavily upon them. Jack pushed open the office door, and they both stepped inside. The once comforting familiarity of the space now felt charged with urgency. Amelia immediately headed to the conference table, her fingers flipping through the documents they had gathered. "Look at this," Amelia said, pointing to an email thread in the pile. These messages discuss the suppression of adverse effects and the falsification of data. Jack leaned in, scanning the emails with growing disbelief. The emails revealed a coordinated effort to bury negative outcomes and manipulate trial results. The more they uncovered, the more the scope of the conspiracy expanded. A soft knock at the door interrupted their work. Jack glanced up to see Carla standing in the doorway, her face pale. "Jack, there's someone here to see you. They say it's important." Jack exchanged a concerned look with Amelia. "Send them in." A man entered, looking disheveled and nervous. His name tag read Eric Sullivan, and he carried a duffel bag that looked as though it contained more than just personal belongings. "Mr. Turner, Ms. Ross, I'm Eric Sullivan." He introduced himself, his voice trembling. "I work in the pharmaceutical company's IT department. I've been following your investigation, and I have something you need to see." Jack motioned for Eric to sit. "What's this about?" Eric took a deep breath. "I've been noticing some strange activity on the company's internal network. There were files being accessed and deleted, files that seemed related to the trials." Amelia's eyes widened. "What kind of files?" "Confidential reports, patient records, and internal communications," Eric explained. "I managed to copy some of them before they were wiped. They're in this duffel bag." Jack's curiosity was piqued. "Let's see what you've got." Eric unzipped the duffel bag and pulled out a laptop and an external hard drive. He connected the hard drive to the office computer, and the screen flickered to life. The files were encrypted, but Eric had come prepared with decryption tools. As the files decrypted, Jack and Amelia watched the screen with bated breath. The documents were a treasure trove of information, revealing additional layers of the conspiracy. There were reports detailing the negative effects of the treatments that had been kept from the public and evidence of bribery to silence dissenting voices. "This is explosive," Amelia said, her voice filled with awe. "These documents could change everything." Jack nodded, his mind racing. "We need to get these files to a secure location and start preparing our report. This evidence needs to be presented carefully." Just as they were about to leave for a secure location, a shadow fell over the office. The black sedan from earlier that week was parked outside, and a group of men in dark suits approached the building. Jack's heart raced. The pharmaceutical company's enforcers had found them. "Hide the files," Jack hissed to Amelia and Eric. "We need to get out of here now." They quickly stashed the hard drive in a hidden compartment within the office and made their way out through the back exit. The three of them navigated through a maze of alleyways and side streets, their nerves on edge. The black sedan followed at a distance, its presence a constant reminder of the danger they faced. They reached a small, secure apartment that Amelia had arranged as a temporary safe house. Inside, they took a moment to catch their breath. The apartment was sparse but functional, with a small workstation set up for analyzing the files. Jack and Amelia immediately resumed their work, scrutinizing the newly uncovered documents. The more they read, the clearer it became that the conspiracy was not only about falsifying data but also about manipulating the entire medical field for profit. The company's influence extended into regulatory bodies, and the corruption was systemic. As they worked late into the night, Jack's phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Carla, who had managed to slip Jack a note earlier. The message read, "Asterisk, someone's been asking about you and Amelia. Be cautious." Asterisk. The warning underscored the gravity of their situation. The pharmaceutical company was not just watching. They were actively trying to undermine Jack and Amelia's efforts. Exhausted but determined, Jack and Amelia finished their analysis. They had a wealth of evidence, but the challenge now was how to safely expose it. The threats against them had become more real and imminent, and their next steps would be crucial. As they prepared to finalize their report and plan their next move, the gravity of their situation settled in. They were now deeply entangled in a dangerous web of deceit, and their quest for the truth was fraught with peril. Jack knew that each step forward brought them closer to exposing the corruption, but also closer to the risks that came with it. The night wore on, and the flickering light from the desk lamp illuminated the determined faces of Jack and Amelia. They were united in their quest for justice, but the road ahead was fraught with danger. The truth they sought was within reach, but the peril it brought was ever-present. The sky outside the safe house was an expanse of dark clouds, heavy with the threat of an impending storm. Inside, the apartment was dimly lit, the air thick with tension as Jack Turner and Amelia Ross pored over the evidence they had painstakingly gathered. The flickering light of their desk lamp cast long shadows on the walls, accentuating the gravity of their work. Jack's eyes were bleary from hours of scrutinizing documents. He rubbed his temples, trying to focus on the latest batch of encrypted files they had decrypted. Amelia sat across from him, her face illuminated by the screen, her fingers moving swiftly over the keyboard. Suddenly, Amelia's breath caught in her throat. "Jack, you need to see this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes were wide with shock. Jack looked up, his curiosity piqued. He moved closer to the screen, his gaze falling on a document marked "Confidential." Board meeting minutes. The file detailed a recent high-level meeting within the pharmaceutical company, with discussions on strategies to suppress the emerging evidence about their illicit practices. "Look at this," Amelia said, pointing to a particular section. "They're discussing ways to discredit any reports about the adverse effects and to manipulate media coverage." Jack's heart pounded. This is huge. It means they've been actively planning to control the narrative and eliminate any threats to their operations. Amelia nodded. But that's not all. There's something else buried in these minutes. An address. It seems to be a location tied to a series of high-profile meetings and transactions. Jack's eyes narrowed. "Where is it?" Amelia pulled up the location on the map. "It's a private estate upstate, far from the city. It looks like it's been used for secret gatherings." Jack felt a shiver run down his spine. If they're meeting there, it's likely where the key decisions are being made. We need to check it out. As they prepared to leave for the estate, the first drops of rain began to patter against the window, their rhythmic sound a foreboding backdrop to their mission. Jack and Amelia bundled up and headed out into the storm, the tension palpable in the air. They drove through the rain-soaked streets, the windshield wipers struggling to keep up with the downpour. The drive was long and fraught with anxiety, each passing mile bringing them closer to the heart of the conspiracy. The estate loomed ahead, a sprawling mansion isolated amidst dense woods, its grandeur hidden by the storm. Jack parked the car at a safe distance and they approached on foot, moving carefully through the underbrush. The estate was surrounded by high fences and security cameras, their presence a stark reminder of the stakes involved. Using the darkness as cover, they managed to bypass the security systems and found a way into the mansion. They moved stealthily through the grand hallways, their footsteps echoing off the marble floors. The interior was opulent, a stark contrast to the deception and corruption that lay beneath. They reached a study where the door was slightly ajar. Peering inside, they saw a group of high-ranking executives gathered around a table, discussing strategies in hushed tones. The sight confirmed their worst fears. This was where the decisions were made. Jack and Amelia exchanged a look, their determination unwavering. They needed to gather as much information as possible without being detected. They quietly moved to a nearby office, rifling through drawers and files, searching for incriminating evidence. Amelia stumbled upon a folder labeled "Final Strategy." Inside were documents detailing plans to launch a smear campaign against whistleblowers and to buy off key figures in the media. Jack's hands trembled as he read through the pages. "This is it," Jack said, his voice barely a whisper. "This confirms everything we've suspected and more. They're willing to go to any lengths to protect their empire." Suddenly, the door creaked open. Jack and Amelia froze, their hearts racing. One of the executives had come to investigate a noise. They quickly hid behind a large bookcase, barely breathing as the executive entered the room. The executive's phone rang, and he answered it with a hushed voice. "Yes, we're on schedule. The media campaign will discredit Turner and Ross within days." Jack clenched his fists, anger and determination coursing through him. They had to expose this before it was too late. As the executive left, Jack and Amelia quickly gathered the remaining documents and made their way out of the mansion. The rain had turned into a torrential downpour, masking their escape as they dashed back to their car. With the evidence safely secured, they drove back to the city, their minds racing with the implications of their findings. The documents they had uncovered were a game-changer, revealing the full extent of the conspiracy. When they finally arrived back at the safe house, they were exhausted but exhilarated. The storm outside mirrored the storm of revelations they had uncovered. They knew the next steps would be crucial, getting this evidence to the right authorities and ensuring that the truth reached the public before the pharmaceutical company could strike back. Jack and Amelia sat in silence, the weight of their discovery heavy in the air. The grand revelation had shifted the course of their investigation and escalated the stakes to new heights. They were on the brink of exposing a monumental conspiracy, but the challenges ahead promised to be as daunting as the revelations they had just uncovered. The early morning sun struggled to break through the storm clouds, casting a muted light over the city. Jack Turner and Amelia Ross were in the thick of preparations, the urgency in their movements a stark contrast to the calm of the dawning day. Their findings from the estate were explosive, but the pressure of presenting the truth was mounting with every passing hour. Jack paced the room, his mind racing through the details they needed to finalize. Amelia, her face lined with exhaustion, was on the phone with their sources, coordinating their next steps. The tension in the air was almost palpable, each minute ticking by like a countdown to an inevitable confrontation. "I just spoke to Carla," Amelia said, ending the call. "She's confirmed that the media are already starting to pick up the stories we leaked, but the pharmaceutical company is moving quickly to discredit us." Jack's jaw tightened. "We need to stay ahead of them. If they manage to control the narrative, all of our work could be in vain." As if on cue, the phone rang. It was Carla, her voice tinged with urgency. "Jack, Amelia, you need to see this. There's been a coordinated attack on your accounts and sources. They're trying to silence you before the full story gets out." Jack's heart raced. "What do you mean?" Carla explained that their personal and professional contacts were being approached with bribes or threats to withdraw support from their investigation. Their email accounts had been hacked, and confidential information was being leaked in an attempt to discredit them. Amelia's eyes flashed with determination. "We can't let them intimidate us. We have to push forward, no matter what." Jack agreed, but as they were preparing to counter the attack, the front door to the safe house burst open. Two men in dark suits stormed in, their faces cold and determined. Jack and Amelia froze, their hearts pounding as the intruders advanced. One of the men, a tall figure with an icy glare, spoke with authority. "Jack Turner, Amelia Ross, you're in over your heads. Drop the investigation now, or face the consequences." Jack stood his ground, his resolve hardening. "We're not backing down. The truth needs to come out, no matter who tries to stop us." The man's expression darkened. "You're making a grave mistake. The company has resources and influence beyond your imagination. You're playing with fire." Before Jack could respond, the men turned and left, their warning hanging in the air. The threat was clear. Pressure and intimidation would only escalate from here. Jack and Amelia exchanged a determined look. "We need to take the fight to them," Jack said. "We'll present our evidence to the public and the authorities. The world needs to see the truth, no matter the risks." As they prepared their final report, a sense of urgency propelled their actions. They worked around the clock, double-checking every detail and ensuring that their presentation was airtight. They knew the pharmaceutical company would do everything in its power to discredit them, but their commitment to the truth was unwavering. The day of the press conference arrived. The conference room was packed with journalists, cameras, and onlookers, all eager to hear the latest revelations. Jack and Amelia stood at the podium, their faces set with determination. The air was thick with anticipation, the room buzzing with murmurs of curiosity and skepticism. As Jack began to speak, presenting the evidence they had painstakingly uncovered, the room fell into a heavy silence. The documents and data he laid out were damning, painting a clear picture of corruption and deceit within the pharmaceutical company. The revelation of their manipulation, bribery, and efforts to suppress critical information stunned the audience. Amelia took the stage next, her voice steady as she detailed the personal stories of those affected by the company's unethical practices. She spoke of the patients who had suffered and the whistleblowers who had risked everything to bring the truth to light. The reaction was swift. The media erupted with headlines, and the public was thrown into an uproar. The pharmaceutical company's stock plummeted, and calls for investigations grew louder. The once powerful corporation was now under intense scrutiny. But the victory was bittersweet. As Jack and Amelia prepared to leave the conference, they were met with a sea of reporters and photographers, their faces a mix of triumph and anxiety. The company's retaliation was inevitable, and they knew the battle was far from over. Back at the safe house, Jack and Amelia reviewed the aftermath of the press conference. The pharmaceutical company had already begun their counteroffensive, attempting to discredit the evidence and launch smear campaigns against them. The conflict had reached a boiling point, and the stakes were higher than ever. Their efforts had ignited a firestorm, but the fight was far from over. They were now at the center of a storm of public outrage and corporate retaliation, their commitment to justice driving them forward despite the mounting risks. As they prepared for the next phase of their struggle, Jack and Amelia knew that every step they took would be met with fierce resistance. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but their resolve was stronger than ever. They had brought the truth to light, but the real challenge now was to see it through to the end, no matter the cost. The cold wind whipped through the deserted streets as night fell over the city. Jack Turner and Amelia Ross were tense, their nerves taut with anticipation. The press conference had stirred the hornet's nest, and now the pharmaceutical company was gearing up for its final move. Jack and Amelia had received an anonymous tip-off about a clandestine meeting set to take place at the company's headquarters, a location now shrouded in heightened security. They knew this was their chance to confront the company's leadership and push their evidence to the forefront. Under the cover of darkness, they approached the towering glass facade of the headquarters, its sleek exterior reflecting the dim light of the street lamps. The building loomed over them, a symbol of corporate power and corruption. Amelia glanced at Jack, her expression resolute. "We need to get in there and capture everything. This could be our last opportunity to expose them for good." Jack nodded, his eyes scanning the area for any signs of security. "We'll use the blueprints we hacked. The maintenance tunnel should give us access to the building's lower levels." They moved swiftly, slipping through a maintenance door they had unlocked earlier. The narrow, dimly lit tunnel was claustrophobic, its walls lined with pipes and electrical wiring. The air was musty, and the faint sound of machinery echoed off the concrete walls. Navigating through the labyrinthine passages, they finally reached a service elevator. With a deep breath, Jack pressed the button and the elevator creaked open. They stepped inside, their breaths shallow as the elevator ascended. The elevator doors slid open on the top floor, where a grand boardroom awaited. Through the partially open door, they could hear the murmur of voices, executives strategizing, the sound of clinking glasses, and the occasional burst of laughter. The room was a stark contrast to the oppressive atmosphere of the maintenance tunnel. Jack and Amelia exchanged a glance and quietly made their way into the room. They hid behind a large potted plant, peeking out to see the company's CEO, Gregory Hayes, and his inner circle seated around a long conference table. "Ladies and gentlemen," Hayes said, his voice carrying an air of smug confidence, "I trust you all received the latest updates? Our strategy to discredit Turner and Ross is well underway. The media campaign is proving effective, and we're on track to neutralize their influence." Jack's hands clenched into fists. "We need to record this." Amelia set up a small hidden camera, discreetly capturing the conversation. Hayes continued, detailing the company's plans to further manipulate public opinion and ensure that any remaining evidence against them was dismissed as fabricated. "This is bigger than we thought," Amelia whispered, her voice tinged with urgency. "They're not just trying to cover their tracks. They're orchestrating a full-scale propaganda war." As Hayes finished his speech, the room erupted in applause. The executives appeared victorious, their expressions a mix of relief and triumph. Jack and Amelia knew they had to act quickly. They needed to expose this meeting and prevent the company from executing their plans. Jack took a deep breath and stepped out from behind the plant, his voice steady but firm. "Mr. Hayes, your plans end here." The room fell into stunned silence. Hayes's face turned ashen as he recognized Jack and Amelia. "You're not supposed to be here," Hayes stammered, rising from his seat. Amelia quickly took control. "We have all the evidence we need. Your corrupt practices, your attempts to discredit us. It's all on record. The public will know the truth." Hayes's eyes narrowed, his composure returning. "You think you can bring us down with this? We have resources, influence. You're outnumbered." Jack's resolve only strengthened. "It's not just us. The media, the public, everyone's watching. The truth will come out, and your empire will crumble." The tension in the room was palpable. The executives looked around nervously, their arrogance replaced with fear. Hayes glared at Jack and Amelia, his expression a mix of anger and desperation. Just then, the sound of sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Hayes's face betrayed a flicker of panic. "You've underestimated us, Turner. This isn't over." Before Jack could respond, Hayes stormed out of the room, his security team trailing behind him. Jack and Amelia knew they had to leave before they were caught. They grabbed the camera and made a swift exit through a side door, their footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. The night air was cool against their faces as they emerged from the building, the sirens now a distant, haunting reminder of the chaos they had just escaped. They hurried to their car, the adrenaline of the confrontation still coursing through their veins. As they drove away, the city lights flickering past, Jack and Amelia knew they had achieved a significant victory, but the fight was far from over. The company would retaliate, and their journey was not yet complete. They had exposed the truth, but the final chapter of their struggle was still unwritten. The confrontation had reached its boiling point, and the battle for justice was now a matter of survival. The city was a swirling mass of lights and shadows as Jack Turner and Amelia Ross drove through the night, the weight of their recent confrontation pressing heavily on their shoulders. They had successfully recorded the meeting at the pharmaceutical company's headquarters, but the victory was tainted by the imminent threat that loomed over them. The company was not just angry, they were vengeful. Jack glanced at Amelia, her face illuminated by the streetlights that passed in quick succession. Her eyes were focused, a reflection of the determination that had driven them both to this point. The camera, safely tucked away, contained damning evidence that could bring the corrupt corporation to its knees. "We need to make sure this footage gets to the right people," Jack said, his voice low but urgent. "We've got to find a way to protect it." Amelia nodded. "I've set up a meeting with a trusted journalist who can get the story out, but we need to lay low for a while. They're looking for us." Their destination was a small, nondescript apartment on the outskirts of the city, a safe house they had used in the past for emergencies. It was there that they would lay their plans and ensure that the evidence was securely transmitted. As they entered the apartment, a sense of grim determination settled over them. The small, cluttered space was a stark contrast to the sleek corporate environment they had just left behind. They worked in silence, their actions efficient and focused. The camera was connected to a laptop, and Amelia prepared to upload the footage to a secure server. Suddenly, a loud knock echoed through the apartment. Jack's heart skipped a beat. He exchanged a worried glance with Amelia. "They've found us." They moved quickly, turning off the lights and slipping into the shadows. Amelia peered through the peephole, her breath catching when she saw a group of men in dark suits standing in the hallway. The pharmaceutical company's goons were on their trail, and their presence was a chilling reminder of the danger they were in. Jack moved to the window, assessing their options. "We need to get out of here now." Amelia nodded, her face pale but resolute. "There's a fire escape at the back. We can use it to get to the street." They quietly made their way to the fire escape, their hearts pounding in their chests. As they descended, Jack's mind raced. They had come so far, and the stakes had never been higher. The evidence they had could change everything, but at what cost? The night was cold, and the air was thick with tension as they reached the street. They hurried to their car, the sound of their footsteps muffled by the bustling city noises. As they drove away, Jack couldn't shake the feeling of impending danger. "Where do we go from here?" Amelia asked, breaking the silence. "We need to get to the journalist," Jack replied. "But we also need to make sure we're not followed." They took a series of winding routes, their vigilance heightened by the knowledge that their every move could be monitored. As dawn approached, they finally reached a secluded cafe where the journalist, Carla, was waiting. Carla greeted them with a mix of concern and urgency. "You're running out of time. The company's retaliation is getting more aggressive. I've arranged for a secure channel to broadcast your evidence, but we need to move fast." Amelia handed over the camera, her hands trembling slightly. "This footage needs to reach the public. It's the only way to hold them accountable." Carla took the camera with a nod. "I'll make sure it gets out, but you two need to go into hiding. The company won't stop until they've silenced you." Jack and Amelia agreed, knowing that their fight was far from over. As Carla went to work, they prepared for their next move. The sacrifices they had made were immense, sacrifices of safety, normalcy, and even their personal freedom. As they left the cafe, the enormity of their situation sank in. They had taken a stand against a powerful adversary, but the cost was their own security. The company's threats were real, and the danger was ever present. In the days that followed, Jack and Amelia went into hiding, moving from place to place to avoid detection. Their names were splashed across headlines, the evidence they had uncovered sparking outrage and calls for reform. The pharmaceutical company was facing intense scrutiny, and their operations were under investigation. But the personal toll was heavy. Jack and Amelia were cut off from their old lives, their identities hidden. The constant fear of being discovered loomed over them, a reminder of the price they had paid for their pursuit of justice. Despite the sacrifices, they remained steadfast in their commitment to their cause. The battle was far from over, but they had ignited a spark that would continue to burn. The fight against corruption was ongoing, and their role in it was a testament to their courage and resolve. The early morning sun filtered through the cracks of the dingy curtains in the small, nondescript apartment. It cast a soft glow across the room, illuminating the faces of Jack Turner and Amelia Ross as they sat at the worn-out table. The sense of exhaustion was palpable, but so was the quiet pride that lingered in the air. Their fight had taken a toll, but it had also brought about significant change. Jack looked out the window, his eyes scanning the horizon as if searching for answers in the rising sun. The city had been buzzing with the fallout from the pharmaceutical company scandal, and the ripple effects were visible everywhere. Protests, calls for reform, and news headlines denouncing corporate corruption. The public outrage was palpable, and the company's once impenetrable facade was now cracking under the pressure. Amelia was at the table, working on a laptop, her fingers moving rapidly across the keyboard. The footage they had captured was making waves, and the investigations were gaining momentum. Yet, despite the progress, they both knew that their lives would never be the same. "Looks like the company is finally facing some real consequences," Amelia said, glancing up with a weary smile. "This could be the turning point we hoped for." Jack nodded, though his expression was thoughtful. "It's hard to believe how far we've come, but I can't shake the feeling that our journey is far from over." The apartment door creaked open, and Carla, the journalist who had helped them, stepped inside. Her face was a mixture of relief and determination. "I wanted to check in and see how you two are holding up. The story's being covered extensively, and there are calls for more investigations into corporate corruption." Jack and Amelia exchanged a glance. Carla's support had been invaluable, and her presence was a reassuring reminder of the allies they had gained along the way. "We're doing all right," Amelia said. But we're still on the move. It's safer this way. Carla nodded. I understand. I've set up some new contacts who can help you lay low while continuing to support your cause. And there's another thing. I've been approached by a few organizations interested in hearing your story. They want to spotlight the impact of your work and the need for systemic change. Jack's eyes brightened. That's great to hear. We need to keep pushing for reform and make sure this doesn't get buried. Carla handed Jack a folder. Inside, you'll find information on a few potential interviews and speaking engagements. You have a voice, and it's important that it continues to be heard. As Carla left, Jack and Amelia sat in silence, absorbing the weight of the moment. The apartment, though modest, felt like a sanctuary, a place where they could regroup and plan their next steps. Amelia broke the silence, her voice filled with resolve. We've faced so much already. It's time to use what we've learned to drive real, lasting change. Jack agreed, his thoughts already racing ahead. We've seen the power of truth and perseverance. It's our responsibility to keep fighting, not just for ourselves, but for all those who've been affected by corruption and injustice. They spent the rest of the day strategizing, mapping out their next moves, and preparing for the new phase of their journey. The fight against corruption had shifted from a personal battle to a broader mission, and they were ready to embrace the challenge. As evening fell, Jack and Amelia prepared to leave their temporary haven. They were heading to a new location, but this time, there was a sense of purpose and anticipation in their steps. The sacrifices they had made, the danger they had faced, it had all led to this moment of new beginnings. The city outside was bustling with life, a stark contrast to the uncertainty they had faced. It was a reminder that, despite the struggles and sacrifices, the world continued to turn, and with it, their story would inspire others to stand against injustice and seek change. Jack took a deep breath as they stepped out into the night. We're making a difference, Amelia. It's just the beginning. Amelia smiled, her eyes reflecting the determination they both shared. Here's to new beginnings, and to continuing the fight for what's right. As they walked into the night, their resolve was unwavering. The challenges ahead were uncertain, but they were ready to face them with the same courage and commitment that had brought them this far. The world was full of possibilities, and their journey was just beginning. Click on the video being recommended to you now.